I met Julian at a busy downtown coffee shop. He was reading a thick novel, and his intense focus drew my eye. When our gazes met, he offered a warm, disarming smile. He was incredibly charming, articulate, and carried an air of fascinating mystery. He spoke vaguely about his past, mentioning extensive travels for work that left few permanent roots and implied a driven, focused personality. I found this alluring, a sign of someone who lived life on his own terms. He was a whirlwind of romantic gestures, impromptu weekend getaways, thoughtful gifts that seemed to know my deepest desires, and passionate letters that spoke of a love so profound it felt destined. My friends, usually skeptical, were utterly charmed, saying I'd finally found a man who truly understood me. I was completely swept off my feet, convinced I had found my soulmate, my forever. Within 6 months, we were married, and I felt like the luckiest woman alive. The honeymoon phase lingered, but within a few months, a subtle shift began. Julian's charming mystery slowly warped into unsettling paranoia. He started checking the locks multiple times a night, listening intently at the windows. He'd meticulously sweep our apartment for what he called listening devices, casually dismissing my bewildered questions with a tense chuckle. Just a habit from my consulting days, darling. Sensitive information, you know. His travels became more frequent, his explanations more vague. He discouraged me from seeing old friends, arguing they brought negative energy or were too gossipy. If I insisted, he'd grow agitated, a vein throbbing in his temple before sighing and saying, "I just want to protect you, Eleanor. Some people can't be trusted." I started to isolate myself, caught between my dwindling social life and his escalating demands for privacy. I convinced myself it was his way of protecting our precious bubble, that I was being overly sensitive. The emotional manipulation was a slow, suffocating poison. If I questioned his secrecy, his vague absences, his eyes would harden, and his voice would drop to a chilling whisper. "How can you possibly doubt me, Eleanor? After everything I've done for us?" He'd twist my words, making me feel irrational, insecure, a burden on his busy, important life. He accused me of spying on him, of trying to expose him, but never explained what it was. The constant accusations wore me down, making me second-guess my own memory, my own sanity. I became a nervous shadow, meticulously planning my every move, my every word, to avoid triggering his volatile shifts. I lived in a state of quiet, tense anxiety, terrified of what would happen if I accidentally stumbled upon a detail he didn't want me to see. The emotional abuse escalated, designed to keep me compliant and silent. The physical violence was a shocking crescendo. It happened only once, a searing, open-handed slap across my face, when he found an old text from my cousin, asking if I was okay, if he was treating me right. He told me it was my own fault, for making him angry, for making him lose control. I was a prisoner in my own marriage, too ashamed and too broken to tell anyone. The true, horrifying revelation came during one of Julian's unexplained absences. I was tidying the attic, a forgotten space, when my hand brushed against a loose floorboard. Curiosity, a tiny spark of my old self, prompted me to pry it open. Hidden within was a small, worn wooden box. My heart hammered as I opened it. Inside, nestled amongst dried flowers, was a single, faded, crinkled photograph. It was a picture of Julian, much younger, probably in his early 20s, but undeniably him. He stood smiling, his arm around a beautiful woman, and nestled between them, a small, bright-eyed boy, no older than 5. My first thought was another family, a secret life. But then I saw the date scrawled on the back in faded blue ink. October 12, 2005. Over 2 decades ago, long before he claimed to have met anyone significant. And beneath the date, a different name, David. My world tilted, then shattered. David, not Julian. The man I knew, the man I married, wasn't just a liar with another family. He was an imposter. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Driven by a desperate, sickening need for answers, I sat down and, using a hidden tablet, began to quietly research cold cases. I searched local news archives from the general region he'd vaguely mentioned in his fabricated stories. My fingers trembled as I typed, and then a headline screamed back at me from 2 decades ago. Unsolved family tragedy. Mother murdered. Child missing in town name. Father vanishes. A chilling, grainy police sketch of the prime suspect flashed on the screen, a younger, harder version of the man I married. Eleanor, with a gut-wrenching certainty, knew the truth. The man I married wasn't just a liar with another family. He was a man who had changed his identity to escape a heinous crime. His travels were not for work, but a meticulously planned evasion. His paranoia wasn't about being caught by police. It was about being found by the ghost of his past, or worse, the child he abandoned. My entire life, my love, my trust, had been built on the foundation of a murderer's desperate secret. The betrayal burned deeper than any bruise, leaving a gaping hole in my soul. I had given my life to a monster who had meticulously crafted a new identity, a new life built on a lie. He was an actor, and our entire relationship, our marriage, our future, all of it was his final, most elaborate and cruelest performance. And as I gathered what little I could, slipping out into the dawn, I realized the perfect man was just a perfect lie, and my life depended on escaping his deadly charade. I met Arthur at a charity gala. He wasn't loud or flashy, but there was an intensity in his eyes, a quiet charm that drew me in like a moth to a flame. He spoke passionately about his work, listened intently to every word I said, and made me feel like the most fascinating woman in the room. He was a successful architect, respected, seemingly grounded, but with a hint of melancholy that I found irresistibly intriguing. My friends said he was too good to be true, but I was swept away. We had a whirlwind romance, dinners, weekend trips, late-night conversations that peeled back layers of my soul I didn't know existed. I felt deeply, completely in love, convinced I had found my soulmate. We were married within 8 months. The first few months of our marriage were blissful. He was still attentive, still passionate, but subtle changes began to creep in. He started commenting on my wardrobe. "That dress is beautiful, Clara, but I think you'd look even more radiant in emerald green. It really brings out your eyes." Or, "Have you ever considered styling your hair like this? It would frame your face perfectly." At first, I thought it was sweet, a loving husband wanting his wife to look her best. He'd bring me clothes, jewelry, perfumes that he'd picked out himself. He had impeccable taste, so I didn't question it. I started wearing less makeup, more natural styles, clothes that were elegant but understated, always in muted tones of green, blue, and gray. He said I looked like a dream. A part of me thrilled at his attention, but another part felt stifled, like I was slowly being painted into someone else's portrait. Then the control tightened. He grew irritable if I didn't follow his suggestions, his compliments replaced by sharp, disappointed sighs. "I thought you understood what I liked, Clara," he'd say, his voice laced with subtle disapproval. He started criticizing my laugh, my gestures, even the way I walked. "You're so clumsy, darling. Try to be more graceful." He'd make me practice my posture, my smile. If I pushed back, even gently, he'd turn cold, his eyes flat and distant. "You're ruining things, Clara. We had something so perfect. Why do you always have to complicate it?" He'd make me feel guilty for existing outside of the perfect image he had in his mind. The arguments escalated into his shouts, his slamming doors, leaving me trembling in the quiet aftermath, wondering what I had done wrong. I felt like I was constantly failing an unspoken test, trying to embody a woman I didn't recognize. I began to notice strange things. He had an old, ornate locket he often wore, and sometimes he'd absent-mindedly trace patterns on it while staring at me with that intense, almost hungry look. Once, when he was out, I found a hidden compartment in his old desk. Inside, there was a stack of photographs. They were old, sepia-toned, and they showed a woman who looked strikingly, terrifyingly like me. The same long, dark hair, the same deep-set eyes, the exact same small birthmark just above her left eyebrow. My breath hitched. She even wore a dress in the same shade of emerald green he loved. Next to the photos was a single, faded newspaper clipping. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was an obituary. The woman in the photos had died almost 15 years ago. Her name was Lillian. She was his younger sister. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't just a resemblance. It was uncanny. And then the horrifying truth clicked into place. He hadn't fallen in love with me. He had found me. I was a replacement, a living ghost. All the clothes, the hairstyles, the mannerisms he had pushed on me. He wasn't trying to make me a better version of myself. He was trying to make me her. The love he had for me was a twisted, obsessive devotion to his dead sister, projected onto my unsuspecting face. The man I married wasn't just controlling. He was a living shrine to a ghost, and I was merely his chosen idol. The betrayal was a physical blow worse than any slap. Every tender word, every loving gesture, every passionate kiss, it was all a lie, meant for someone else. I wasn't Clara to him. I was Lillian. The regret was a bitter taste in my mouth. The regret for the naive woman who had walked blindly into this twisted romance, believing it was fate. I packed a small bag, my hands trembling but resolute. I couldn't stay in that house, haunted by a dead girl's shadow, with a monster who saw her reflection in my eyes. The escape was harrowing, a frantic dash into the night, but every step away was a step towards reclaiming the life that was stolen, not by a single act, but by a chilling, obsessive love that was never truly mine. I met Elias at a local art fair. He was a photographer, quiet and observant, with a gaze that seemed to penetrate right into your soul. He spoke softly, but every word felt profound. He listened intently when I confided in him about my past, especially about my younger sister, Lily, who had vanished without a trace when we were teenagers. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply held my hand and said, "I can't imagine the pain you've carried. You're incredibly strong." He made me feel seen, truly seen, not just as a survivor of grief, but as a woman worthy of deep, unconditional love. He promised me a future free from shadows, a life where I could finally heal. I was so utterly starved for that kind of understanding, that kind of quiet strength, that I fell desperately in love. Within months, we were married, and I believed I had found my anchor, my safe harbor. The first year was a fragile piece. He was always there, always attentive, but his attentiveness slowly morphed into a suffocating closeness. He hated it if I wasn't within his sight. If I went to the grocery store alone, he'd call repeatedly, his voice laced with a possessive anxiety. "Where are you? Are you safe? I worry about you out there alone." He'd say it was love, a deep concern for my well-being, and I tried to believe him. He encouraged me to stop working, insisting he could provide everything. I resisted at first, but his arguments were so logical, so persuasive, that it seemed foolish to refuse. "Imagine, darling," he'd whisper, "a life where you never have to stress, where you can just be." And slowly, I let my professional life fade, my world shrinking to the confines of our beautiful, yet increasingly isolated, home. Then the boundaries blurred, and the control became physical. The first time, it was an argument over old photographs. I had pulled out a box of family albums, pictures of Lily, smiling and vibrant. He grew agitated, his face contorting. "Why dwell on the past, Clara? You need to move forward." When I insisted, he grabbed the box, photos scattering, and his grip on my arm tightened until I cried out. "Don't make me lose control," he hissed, his eyes burning with an unfamiliar rage. After that, the violence became a terrifying rhythm. A shove if I mentioned Lily's name too often. A slap if I tried to assert any independence. He'd apologize, his eyes brimming with tears, swearing it was his fear of losing me, his own deep-seated anxieties. And I, trapped and terrified, would accept his remorse, desperate for the man I married to reappear. The stealing began subtly. First, it was small, sentimental items. A locket of lilies I kept, a childhood drawing she made. I'd search for them frantically, convinced I was just misplacing things. When I asked Elias, he'd either deny seeing them or suggest, with that soft, understanding voice, "Perhaps it's time to let go of these old things, darling. They only bring you pain." Then it escalated to my own belongings. Jewelry, cash from my purse, small electronic devices. He'd meticulously cover his tracks, leaving me bewildered, questioning my own memory, my own sanity. He made me feel like I was losing my mind, spiraling into forgetfulness. The twist came on what would have been Lily's 30th birthday. I was downstairs, overwhelmed by grief, when I heard Elias's footsteps in the attic. He rarely went up there. A strange, insistent curiosity pulled me. I found the attic door ajar, and a faint, sweet scent, like old roses and something metallic, wafted down. My heart hammered as I slowly ascended the creaking stairs. The attic was dark, dusty, but in the far corner, a single beam of light illuminated a meticulously organized space. There were more boxes, exactly like the ones Elias used for his photography equipment. Each was labeled with a date, and inside were my lost belongings. Lily's locket, my stolen jewelry, my missing phone. But then I saw the other boxes, labeled with other names. Names of young women, all around Lily's age, who had gone missing in our town over the last 15 years. And next to each item, a faded photograph. A Polaroid of the woman, taken from afar, looking vibrant and unaware. My breath hitched, and in one small, unmarked box, a single faded yellow ribbon. It was the same ribbon Lily had worn in her hair the day she disappeared. My vision blurred. Underneath it, a small, handwritten journal, Elias's familiar, elegant script. The first entry detailed his obsession with Lily, how he had watched her, how he had orchestrated her disappearance. The subsequent entries described his methods, his collections, his twisted desire to possess the light he saw in young women. And my name was everywhere. His obsession wasn't just with me. It had started with Lily. The world tilted. The man I married, the man who had promised to heal my pain, was the monster who had caused it. His love wasn't for me. It was for the echo of my sister he saw in my grief. His peace was built on the silent screams of others. The terror wasn't just that he had stolen my life, my things, my sanity. It was that he had stolen Lily's life, too, and had been patiently waiting for me, the sister, to become his next, most personal collection. The betrayal was an abyss, a wound that swallowed every memory, every tender touch, revealing them as pieces of a terrifying, meticulously planned lie. I ran from that attic, not just from Elias, but from the chilling revelation that the man I married was not just a monster, but the architect of my deepest, most agonizing trauma. I met Leo at an art exhibition. He wasn't the typical gallery-hopping type. He was quiet, observing, with a thoughtful intensity that felt like a magnet. We talked for hours that night, about art, about life, about the fierce independence that defined me. He told me he admired my spirit, my unwavering sense of self. He said most women he met were easily swayed, but I was different. I was a force, a wild, beautiful thing. He saw me, he truly saw me, and for the first time I felt utterly understood, utterly appreciated for who I was. My friends thought he was a little too intense, a little too perfect, but I was head over heels. Within a year, we were married, and I genuinely believed I had found the one person who would cherish my true self forever. The first few months of our marriage were an intoxicating dream. He still praised my independence, my strong opinions. But then the subtle nudges began. If I wanted to go out with my friends, he'd suggest a quiet night in, just us. "You're so special, darling," he'd coo. "Why waste your energy on frivolous people when we have each other?" He'd frown when I wore my bold, vibrant colors, gently suggesting, "You have such a serene beauty, Clara. I think muted tones would highlight it better, don't you?" He'd subtly critique my assertiveness at work, advising me to be softer, more pliable. He never commanded. He merely suggested, always with that loving, intense gaze that made me want to please him. I dismissed the tiny voice in my head that whispered, "He's trying to change you." I told myself he just saw a better version of me, a more refined me. I softened my edges, quieted my voice, traded my bright wardrobe for elegant, understated pieces. I thought I was evolving for the man who adored me. Then the control tightened, almost imperceptibly at first, then with chilling precision. He started helping me manage my emails, organizing my social media, until I realized he had all my passwords, monitoring every digital interaction. If I tried to reconnect with a friend, he'd somehow know, and a coldness would descend between us. He'd accuse me of being ungrateful for his devotion, or stubborn, for not understanding his vision for our perfect life. The verbal barbs became sharper, aimed directly at the independent spirit he once claimed to love. "You're too much, Clara. You always have to fight. Can't you just be?" The physical abuse started when I finally pushed back. I wanted to restart my passion project, a bold, vibrant art series. He scoffed, "That's not you anymore, darling. You're refined now." When I insisted, he grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in. "Don't make me disappoint you, Clara," he said, his eyes filled with a terrifying mix of sorrow and menace. From then on, the physical escalations were tied to my attempts to reclaim my old self. A slap when I wore an old colorful scarf. A shove against the wall when I spoke too assertively. He would apologize, beg for forgiveness, his face distorted by what seemed like genuine pain. "You make me do this, Clara," he'd whisper, tracing the bruises he'd left on my skin. "Why can't you just be easy? Why can't you just be perfect?" The ultimate horror unfolded one rainy afternoon. He was away on a business trip, and a forgotten package arrived for him, a specialized art supply from a company I didn't recognize. It was addressed to his old studio, a place he rarely mentioned. My curiosity, a spark of the old me, flared. I found the spare key he kept hidden and drove to the dusty, disused studio across town. The main room was empty, but a small, hidden door was tucked behind a false bookshelf. My heart hammered as I pushed it open. Inside, it wasn't a storage closet. It was a meticulously organized archive. There were shelves filled with clear acrylic boxes, each labeled with a woman's name and a date. And in each box, a single personal item, a bright red scarf, a loud, eccentric earring, a small, vibrant painting, and beside each item, 2 framed photographs. One of a woman, vibrant and full of life, bursting with unique personality, and the second, a woman with dulled eyes, wearing muted clothes, her posture submissive, her smile fragile. I picked up one box. The name was Anna. In her before photo, she had a wild, joyful laugh, the same fierce independence that Leo had once praised in me. In her after photo, she looked exactly like the perfect version of me he was trying to create. I opened another box. Sarah. Another. Emily. Each before photo was a mirror of my past self. Each after photo, a terrifying glimpse into my future. And then, at the very end of the shelf, a small, empty box. My name was etched on it, Clara, and below it a date, our wedding day. The blood drained from my face. He hadn't fallen in love with me for my unique spirit. He had selected me for it. I wasn't his partner. I was his next project. His love was a twisted, obsessive compulsion to break independent women, to collect their vibrant pasts, and to mold them into his perfect, docile dolls. The regret was a bitter, suffocating wave. Every kind word, every tender touch, every suggestion was part of a meticulously planned destruction. The monster I married wasn't just abusive. He was a collector of shattered souls, and I was meant to be his latest, most prized acquisition. I fled that studio, not just from Leo, but from the ghost of the woman he wanted me to become, the ghost of Lillian, Anna, Sarah, Emily, and the ghost of the vibrant Clara he was so determined to erase. And I knew, with a horrifying certainty, that my life depended on breaking free from his monstrous collection.